Well, there's a big change from overall from the early 19th century to a century after that in terms of what women were allowed to do and expected to do and what prepared them for it. So starting in the early to mid 19th century, you have a lot of what becomes women's education, women's higher education develop. And that has a whole lot to do with how women were able to take a more public role in society, not be dictated by restrictions in family life or in their legal status. And that leads eventually to getting the ability to vote and to play a part in the electoral process.
With my family, especially my grandmother, we used to laugh because we didn't always agree, especially on a national level. So we would just respectfully laugh at each other and say that we just watched each other's vote out. But we did it in such a, caring, respectful way that it was always fun and an honor to be able to have that conversation back and forth.
Of course, yes, I do have an opinion about voting. This is the only way that we can get representation for our communities out there. Our vote is definitely what puts the officials there representing us, and there are our voices out there. They know what we need as a community. So voting is definitely a duty for every citizen.
I think I was in my 30s when I decided to register to vote. For a while I actually thought that, voting really didn't matter.
I have been voting since I've been of age to vote. I believe voting is not only a right, but it's a responsibility. We live in a democracy, and if you don't participate in the democracy, you don't really have a right to make your opinions heard.
So my strongest memory of voting is probably going into the voting booth with my mom and seeing that big red arm come across to close the curtain and, looking up at the voting booth, and it always seemed like such a serious thing. And now I know that it is a very serious thing and it's a great responsibility. And so I always make it a point to bring my kids with me whenever I go to vote.
I want to say that my experience with voting has been, there was this unspoken pressure, right? As a second generation immigrant and having family members, including my mother, in this country who was not able to vote, and knowing that there were so many issues that we were confronted with because of the policies in place, and I personally felt pressure of when I am able to vote, I need to, because my everyday living conditions, my communities are informed by the voices that do cast their ballot, and I want to make sure that when I'm able to, that I can do that, because I do feel that I have a personal responsibility to really honor and celebrate all of the work of the women and their allies that made it possible for me to vote, and also wanting to honor the challenges of my ancestors in coming here, and I feel like it's continuous work of wanting to do that.
Standing in front of the White House after Obama won, I felt very hopeful and part of something greater, and that I had actually contributed to making a change, and I got to see that happening in front of me.
I do have a memory about growing up, learning about the voting process, and in a very strange way taking part of it. When my parents had moved to another country as immigrants, they were not fluent in English. Many times I was their translator, and I had to go into the voting booth with my parents and help them understand, translate for them, some of that process. It's probably against the law, I'm sure, but they made me go.
I was involved in the period right around 1960 in terms of the voting, the access to voting, and the evolution of civil rights in this country, and that period of experiences of the period of the lunch counter sit-ins in the South and the bus boycotts and the freedom rides and so forth, I think were formative to so many people in my generation.
When I was growing up, my mom was a midwife in the white and black neighborhood. She lived, and it was Jim Crow State in South Carolina. But I never felt that way. I never act that way. God, my sisters brought my father a car, so we didn't have to ride the freaking bus. I can tell you stories of Jim Crow. Oh, man. But I'm telling you, I never felt that way, like I'm saying today.
Bueno, realmente hemos tenido que ser fuertes. Mi esposo y yo hemos tratado de inculcarle a mis hijos a ser fuerte. Sí han habido situaciones en las que conocidos o amigos cercanos, e incluso mis hijos, con todo lo que es el racismo y eso, sí los ha tocado de cerca, y para mí ha sido angustiante. He tratado de no demostrárselos a ellos para que ellos tengan esa confianza de poder sobrellevar lo que es el racismo y tratar de ayudar a otros niños que también han sufrido de ellos.
So I was born and raised in Poughkeepsie. I grew up in what we lovingly refer to as the Bricks, but it's Hudson Gardens. And before moving from there, that was my whole world. And not having that knowledge of things happening within the bigger city is something that stagnates the disenfranchised communities. And so I do believe that education is the key.
Yes, the movement, I feel the suffrage for women is still continuing a different form.
I think that we always need to be asking ourselves how we can make voting easier for people and meet people where they are so that we can make that happen, instead of asking ourselves how we can make this process more stringent and more strict.
For me, being like on the cusp of a millennial, kind of, I think I'm like the last year of a millennial, it's inspiring. My sister is fully engrossed, and she's one of those people. Like, she goes to every protest, she makes every, signs. Like, she is, like, her and her group of friends are very serious about making change in in our community as Black Americans. So I think the biggest piece of that, when we look at, like, to your point, people that are disenfranchised, people that are, marginalized, when they take their power back, it's going to be beneficial for the entire world.
I think that voting in local elections is just as important as voting in a presidential election. In order to create any type of change, you have to change where you live, and in order to do that, everybody's voices needs to be heard.
So when it came down to the election, I said, okay, well, if, I need to get in there so I can be able to make those kind of changes. Well, what happened is people looked at it like, oh, it really doesn't matter if I go out and vote or not, or that's a shoo-in for you, it's going to happen. And I end up losing the election by 6 votes. And that's why I explain to people that every vote counts.
I always work in that facility in terms of getting people out to vote. And I started learning all about the methods of how and when and where to vote. Everybody should vote who's able to vote and can vote.
To all the women who has the right to vote, do not allow anyone or anything to stop the right to vote. When you vote, remember, you vote for the women who have sacrificed themselves, who have died for you to have the right. When you vote, vote for the women who cannot vote today. And most of all, tell to the world that you matter when you exercise that right.
If you can vote, please go out and vote for what you believe in, what you believe is going to really help our community and make it better.
Bueno, mi esposo llenó la aplicación para el censo porque sabemos lo importante que es que el gobierno sepa cuántas personas hay en la comunidad y de acuerdo a esa cantidad ellos puedan aportar un apoyo, ya sea para la escuela o para los centros de salud. Entonces sí creo que es importante que las personas se tomen un tiempo para hacer su censo y no quedar así invisibles.
You can make a direct impact of what happens in your community by coming out to vote. You know, sometimes they feel like it's on a national level, it's not going to matter with my vote, but I told them on a local level, it's definitely having an impact.
Activism is all about movement, involvement, the doing.
My message would be to please make sure to vote and to make sure you complete a very simple and brief survey for our census. It is invaluable to our community, for our children, our schools, our programs, that we get that federal funding that only comes around every 10 years.
My message for the community would be to really embrace your unique strengths, to not let yourself be compared to any other place. I think that Poughkeepsie really has an opportunity to use its diversity as its power, and we just need to be brave enough to do that.
You ask women and any business person in Main Street, they call this their home. And they have built Poughkeepsie for more than 20, 30, up to 40 years. The immigrant community has brought the businesses to light and the Poughkeepsie to light as well. And I feel a lot of hope, but it's up to our leaders to recognize that they are where they are because of this community.
I do see in my city a major increase in the activity of Black, Brown, and Latino women when it comes to leadership positions, and it's very encouraging.
There is so much here. I think about the breadth of experiences and cultures that you can be a part of, and there is so much potential for where we can be, and I just love being a part of that movement and all of what's happening here.
As I think about the city of Poughkeepsie and I think about change, what I would really like to see is people being able to fulfill what I think is the promise of Poughkeepsie and their community, being able to have the opportunity to put into play whatever vision they had for themselves.
I moved to Poughkeepsie 3 years ago, thinking that I would be gone by the end of the summer, and was surprised to find myself really in love with this city, and really in love with a lot of the people that I met, and now it's 3 years later, and I'm still here.
Absolutely, I have seen the roots and fibers of this tapestry start to come together. You know, I started this very small gallery on a side street in Poughkeepsie, and we have had unbelievable amounts of diverse crowds come into that gallery, show at that gallery, participate in that gallery. So I'm very hopeful for what the future of Poughkeepsie could be.
What keeps me here is the love that I get back when I'm out there on the streets, meeting the people, actually getting to know their names. They get to know my name. I'm not officer. They call me Renee or Miss Knapp. Some of them will call me Sis, which is pretty interesting and fun. I know they're not saying it out of disrespect. It is respect.
Bueno, en Poughkeepsie encontré la oportunidad de encontrarme de frente con el arte. Cuando yo era niña tenía una inquietud hacia el arte y para mí en México fue muy difícil poder agarrar de cerca la oportunidad que ahora tengo aquí y que hace poco pude estar más cerquita de lo que es el arte, la pintura y
women now, especially younger women, see opportunity, see choice where they had not before. I could tell you, from my own experience, when I first got into this work, the women that I served were much older. They were married most often, several years. They had children with them. The women that come through our doors now are much younger, are willing to take a chance, to reach out, to get help, to figure out what they need to do a lot sooner in their own lives.
My message would be to become more interested in who you are, where you are, and why you are, where you are. Because if you live in a house, the house is your home. If you don't own it, it's still your home while you're in it. And if it's torn down, make sure it gets built up. It's you're the one makes it happen. You know what I mean?
It is very important for us as women and minorities to come together and help each other in any way possible. Like I might have information that she doesn't have, and I might not know people that she doesn't know. And, building a network could definitely help bring us together and work together as a community and make Poughkeepsie better. Because if we don't work together, we don't know each other, we don't know what she does, she doesn't know what I do, how are we gonna come together?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that I think there was one protester who made a sign that said, "You've messed with the last generation," and that struck a chord in me because it was like such an affirmed, like, I am so comfortable in who I am and what I represent in my millennial community that this is going to be the last time that this happens.
One of the changes I would like to see in the city of Poughkeepsie, in our community, is a lot of the young men and women that are growing up. I would like to be a mentor out there and let them learn that they have a future, that they're amazing. Not be followers, be leaders. Especially when you're an officer out there in the community, you get to know these kids. And that is absolutely awesome.
I think if I was going to say something to the community, I would say play your part, don't stay on the sidelines. It's really important. Not that everybody run for office, not that everybody do the same thing, but that everybody find a role that they feel is meaningful.
My message to the community is to say that I am really happy to be here. And again, this is a personal responsibility for me to cast my ballot, for me to share the knowledge that I have, the resources that I have. It's important for me to continue to use my privilege. And I don't often, as a woman of color, the second generation immigrant, as a woman that was born and raised in public housing, I don't often feel that I have privilege, and I realize that I don't have it all. But what I do have, it's enough to go around and be sharing my voice, me saying I am what little brown girl that was raised in the projects looks like. I am here, and you can be here as well. So for all of you out there that are listening and that are watching, just know that I am here to say that I am with you. Y si se puede.